Good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Herbert Harris, and this is Success Mentorship class number 234. Wow. All right, today our topic is solving the riddle of survival. And we picked that topic today because coming out of this pandemic, so many people have had, you might say, interesting experiences in dealing with their finances and where do they go from here. As you know, all of our classes are based on our book, The 12 Universal Laws of Success, and it's available on our website, www.herbertharris.com. That's www.herbertharris.com, and on all of the digital book sites. Also, if you go to our website, you can get information about our home study course. A lot of the things that we do on our Saturday classes are designed to help you transform yourselves from the life that you have to the life that you want to experience. And so the home study course is a way to give you the opportunity to do that at your own pace in your own home. Beautiful. So before we get started, let us do our meditation to put ourselves in the proper place to be prepared to accept, receive, and interact with this message. Let's just sit straight up in our seats, close our outer eyes, open our inner eyes, take a deep breath, let it out slowly. Take a deep breath. Let it out slowly. And in this space of peace and relaxation, we are at peace with ourselves. I am at peace with myself. Let us affirm that together. I am at peace with myself. Just let that peace sink in. Take a deep breath. Let it out slowly. And in this state of peace and relaxation, our minds are open, receptive, and ready to learn. My mind is open, receptive, and ready to learn. Let us affirm that together. My mind is open, receptive, and ready to learn. Once more. My mind is open, receptive, and ready to learn. Take a deep breath. Let it out slowly. And so it is. I want to make sure that everybody can hear me. Yes, let's see. Thank you so much. On Instagram, on Facebook, on our Zoom class. This is a class that I like to do, and especially at this time of year, and especially at this point in the evolution of our economy, in the evolution of our country, and the evolution of the world. I like to start with a quote, and this is a quote from me. And it says this, that money is an awesome servant, but a terrible master. Money is an awesome servant, but a terrible master. And so we're going to be talking today about how do we solve the riddle of survival? What must we do to transform ourselves to create the economic and financial basis to have a good life, to live the life that we desire? This is particularly important because coming out of this pandemic, everything that happens is for a reason. Coming out of this pandemic, one of the things that we realized that the things we thought we knew for sure were not for sure. That many of us who had jobs, who had businesses, because of the situations that happened in the pandemic, literally our jobs stopped, our businesses stopped, Our income stopped. And so literally everything that we were comfortable with and familiar with and that we believed in came to an ending. And so as a result, we are coming out of this pandemic right now, but what we knew is what we must understand is this, is that it is important to learn from every experience. And so the pandemic, in a sense, is a wake-up call. It's really a wake-up call to say we need to pay attention to our finances. We need to pay attention to our lives, the things that we want to be, do, and have. We need to pay attention to our priorities. And so coming out of this pandemic as a wake-up call, the real overall question, the overall objective of this class is, where do I go from here? What do I have to do from this point now? Especially, what must I do now to close out this year strong, to prepare myself for next year, so that I can create the life that I desire, free from stress, free from all the negativity, but a life of abundance, a life of joy, and a life of happiness. And so when we look at this, there are 4 points to sort of take us through this process. Point number 1 is to really get an understanding of what we mean. When I say solve the riddle of survival, what does that mean? Number 2, to assess where we are right now. That as we begin to move into this next level in our lives, it's important to know where we are. As we always speak about the GPS, anything that gives you directions in your life requires 2 things, a location and a destination. Step 3, to look at the lessons we can learn from this experience. What can we learn from this pandemic? When we look at life as 2 things, you either win or you learn. You either have a victory or you get a lesson. You never fail. And so what are the lessons that we learn from this pandemic? And then finally, number 4, what is the strategy to go forward? And going forward is really a strategy. It's not an event, it's a mindset, and it's a set of operational plans that you actually undertake. So based on this sort of overall outline, what is the riddle of survival? And what it means is that we have to be aware of what it takes for us to survive financially. If we are not aware of what it takes for us to survive financially, something happens. We go broke. We end up in a bad financial situation. So we must be aware. When we talk about solving the riddle of survival, we must be aware of the amount of income necessary to take care of ourselves, our family, to provide food, clothing, and shelter, health insurance, all of the things that you need to be happy, to be secure. That those things that you might say the hierarchy of needs, that the survival needs are taken care of so that you can have the peace of mind financially. When we look at this idea of financial security or solving the riddle of survival, one of the things that we have learned over these years, over this last pandemic cycle, is that a job is not all that it was cracked up to be. Think about this. That one of the things that you learned in this pandemic cycle is that there are 2 words that can disrupt your entire financial existence. You're fired. Someone once said job means jobs over, boys. And so this is something we really need to pay attention to, because I think that this next evolution in our economics and in the country and in our personal lives is going to have a much more entrepreneurial flavor, because many people are realizing that if you don't control how that money comes in, if the only thing you have is a job where somebody's paying you what they think you're worth to them and not what you're worth to yourself, that might be a challenge. So let's look at this. To understand that solving the riddle of survival, what does it take to live? What amount of money do you need to live on comfortably? And how do you generate that money? You know, many people live paycheck to paycheck. And it's not just an idea of the poor people. If you're making 100,000 a year and you're spending 110, you're living paycheck to paycheck. We've seen many of the athletes, many of the high earners, people who make millions of dollars a year in a relatively short period of time are dead broke, because they never understood that relationship between what you bring in and what you send out. And so the idea of solving the riddle of survival is to determine what is your ground zero. What do you need to live comfortably in the lifestyle that you're accustomed? And until you determine that, and until you determine a way to provide that income consistently, you're going to be on the paycheck treadmill, the make-do treadmill, the never enough treadmill. Now, you know, this pandemic really gave us some revelations, but let me tell you something. It just really highlighted something that was already going on. According to Forbes magazine, 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. So the pandemic didn't do that. They were already in that hole. And it said 40% of Americans cannot even raise $400. So if there was an emergency, a car breaks down that requires $1,000 repair, they're out of business. And so this pandemic just highlighted a tough situation that already existed. So if we want to get out of that, we want to get away from this living paycheck to paycheck, we have to determine what it takes. What is our ground zero? How do we make enough money to take care of ourselves and our families? And it's really about mindset. You know, I'm in North Carolina, and every time you look at their building, they just built, I think, 3,000 homes down near the river. And so you have to say, well, where are people coming from? And they say people are coming from the north to the south. Why are they doing that? If you look at a place like New York right now, for example, if you have 2 boys, 2 girls, a wife, a husband, a family, and you need a 3-bedroom apartment, in New York, you're talking $5,000 a month rent for a 3-bedroom apartment, 2 baths, or more. One of my friends lives in New York, and thank God for rent control. He has an 8-room apartment, and under rent control, he pays about $1,500 a month. The apartment right next door was obtained. The landlord took that apartment, broke it up into 2 apartments, charging $3,500 a month for each. So one of the reasons that people are migrating south, think about this, if you're paying $5,000 a month rent or mortgage, then your rent or mortgage should be about 25% of your income. That means that you need to make $20,000 a month. That's $250,000 a year. How many people are doing that? And so that is the reason that we have this influx of people coming south. Once again, that is their way to solve the riddle of survival. So we must educate ourselves. We must understand that money is a mindset. Sit down, lay out your budget. How much do you need for food? How much do you need for rent, for mortgage? How much do you need for education, for insurance? And once you establish that number, once we're back to the goal setting piece. Once you establish that number, that is your ground zero. And now you know what to work on. And in this process, when we really look at where we are right now to get this ground zero, we really have to face the facts. And what it makes you look at is some of the things that you're doing. Are you spending money unwisely? Are you buying a pocketbook that costs $9,000 when you could buy one that's $150 that does the same thing? It carries your money, your keys. We often say that establishing this ground zero makes you break it down. What's really important? Makes you establish new priorities. Once you've established your ground zero, then that next key now is to look at where you are and then do what must be done to create the money necessary to maintain yourself. One of my good friends, Russell Hemphill, said this. He said, if your outflow exceeds your income, your upkeep becomes your downfall. I'm going to say that again. If your outflow, if the amount that you're spending exceeds the amount that you're taking in, then your upkeep, your life, creates your problem, your downfall. So let us look now, once we become clear on what is important, once we become more attentive to how we spend our monies, how we circulate our money, let us look to the next step. When we look at things like health insurance, when we look at things like life insurance, these are necessities now. One thing this pandemic points out is if you don't have insurance, you got a problem. So once you've established your ground zero, this is what you need to work with. And that incorporates a lot of things. You have to have a budget. You have to look at your priorities in spending. There's a lot of work you can do on that, but the point is to have the mindset to seek to get that answer, because if you don't find out what your ground zero is, you can't build. Once you've understood your ground zero, then let's look at what you might say, the wealth building principles, the accumulation principles. How do you, now that you know what you need to survive, how do you fix it? How do you address it? What we're talking about today really comes, a lot of this is from chapter 8, the law of value. And we talk about the 4 principles of wealth building. To become aware of the earning principle. The earning principle says that you have to earn as much money as possible. But it's on a deeper level. What are you willing to exchange to earn the money you need to solve the riddle of survival? So now that's a powerful thought, because the earning principle really governs how you exchange your most valuable asset, your time, to create the income necessary to solve the riddle of survival. Let's look at the spending principle. What are the things you do with the money that you earn? And when we talk about the spending principle, I like to look at it as a circulation principle. You know, spending has a sense of finality. When you spend it, it's gone. But look at the idea of spending from circulation. So maximize your income and then create your circulation so that it's intelligent, so that you're literally spending, you're circulating less than you are generating, so that you can then look at the third principle of wealth building, is the savings principle. So based on these 3, you make as much as you can, spend, circulate it most effectively so that you'll have surplus. In other words, your saving is the difference between your income and your expenditures. When you circulate your money, I like to think of circulating or spending as priming the pump, so that every dollar you send out now has a purpose. You know, in the country, whenever you go to the well, to get all the water that you need from the well, you have to prime it. You have to pour in a cup of water, a bucket of water to make that connection. And so when we look at how we spend our money, how we circulate our money, look at it as though we're priming the pump. So when you buy a depreciating asset like a car, you may spend $50,000 for a car, and the moment you drive it out onto the street, it's worth 10% less than we spent for it. So that may or may not be a great investment. Look at it critically. But the point is to look at now how you circulate the money as priming the pump, so that you can save more. So the saving principle says this, that maximize your income, minimize your circulation so that you'll have surplus. And then the fourth principle is the investment principle. If you never have surplus, then you can never invest. As we look at this, I often talk to a young person, and they were saying, I was saying, the importance of saving. He said, well, Dr. Harris, I'd love to save because, I'm broke right now, but I can't afford to save. Let me give you a clue, folks. If you're broke, you cannot afford not to save. As you generate your income, treat saving as an expense. We often say, pay yourself first. Every company, when we look at our lives, we're a lot like a company, like a city. Every city, every county has what they call it a rainy day fund. And that's a fund where they set aside enough money to handle pretty much most emergencies. In your business, in your life, you have to save enough money so that you can handle those emergencies, so that a $500 expense doesn't take you out. Look at yourself financially as a business. The fourth principle of wealth creation, that investment principle, is critical, because investments in the long term are the way that you free yourself and you sustain the riddle of survival on a permanent basis. These four principles: earn as much as possible, circulate your money prudently, save a certain amount to handle emergencies, and take a portion of what you save to invest. You see, money is the original generator. The difference between banks and most people. Banks make money on money. And so when you have investments, you're literally making money on money. And in a long-term sense, you really want to create a lifestyle where your investments take care of you. Sandra often talks about she worked 25, 30 years, but she systematically invested so that over that period of time, she accumulated over $100,000. You see, when you look at yourself as a business, you can transform your financial life. So the question arises then, how do you accumulate resources? Because it really comes down to accumulation of resources. How do you accumulate resources? How do you create wealth? Well, there are three ways to create wealth. You can create wealth by a job. There's a lady, Osceola McCarthy, a lady out in, I think, in Texas. And she was what they call a washerwoman. A washerwoman was a person who did other people's laundry. We're talking in the South, starting in the late 40s. She really never made more than $200, $250 a week. And that's on the high side. But yet over 40 to 50 years, she accumulated $250,000. So a job can work for you to help you solve the riddle of survival, but you must factor in time. And so often a job requires you to work a greater period of time. Over 40 or 50 years, you can create that wealth. She eventually set up a scholarship, $150,000 scholarship, and it was matched by other companies for young ladies, pretty African-American ladies who never had a chance to go to college, who didn't have money. One of the interesting things about life is that it's important to create wealth, to treat this surplus in a way that it's looked at as a seed to create future wealth. One of the things that often, it's so sad when people make their transition and folks get a life insurance policy. I've seen it happen so many times, and you've seen it. Some person gets a $10,000 life insurance payment after the loved one has made their transition. And they take that $10,000 and they go and spend it. They buy a car. They buy a coat. They buy a $10,000 Birkin bag. But think about this, what would happen? If you took that $10,000 and said, hey, this is the seed from my mom, from my dad, from my relative. This is a seed to create wealth for me and my family. If you took that $10,000 and invested, because you were living all along, you were feeding yourself, you were surviving. Instead of spending it, suppose you invested it. There's something called the rule of 72. And what the rule of 72 says, anytime you're in a what they call a compound interest situation, which is what the bank, they pay interest. They pay 2%, 5%. That if you take the number 72 and you divide it by the interest rate, then that tells you how quickly your money will double. If you're right now 20 years old and somebody makes their transition and you get $10,000, do you know that you could grow that 10,000 into $1 million? But how does it happen? Using the rule of 72, if you had a 10% investment, something you could get a 10% return on that 10,000, then 10 divided into 72 means that the money would double roughly every 7 years. So think about this now. $10,000 in 7 years, you've got 20,000. In 14 years, you got 40,000. In 21 years, you've got 80,000. In 28 years, you have 160,000. In 35 years, you have 320,000. In 42 years, you have 640,000. And in 49 years, you have $1,280,000. So now if you were 20 years old, you're working, wouldn't it be nice to know that at 50, you're going to have a $1.2 million nest egg to take care of you for the rest of your life? That's what we're talking about, solving the riddle of survival. So this idea, this mindset, so a job can do it over time, investments. The second key is to accumulate income through investments, as we said, right? Job is one, investments is second. The third way is to own a business. And this, I think, is what's going to happen right now. This is where many people now become more and more entrepreneurs, because the whole world is set up for businesses. The tax laws favor businesses. Investment laws favor businesses. Everything is set up for business. If you have a business, you can make deductions from your mortgage, from your telephone, from your home-based business. People can literally use a home-based business to shelter their income. And so this key point now, this is a very key point, that when you look at how do you sustain your riddle of survival, how do you do it? A job, investments, and a business. Right now, your business is probably the most awesome way for you to create that income that can take you where you want to go. So we've looked at 3 points. We have looked at what solving the riddle of survival is. We've assessed your situations. We've looked at some of the lessons. This is that third point. Some of the lessons that we learned from this pandemic, that nothing can be counted on. A job is insecure. That you must create an income flow, a mindset for investment, so that you can then have your money working for you. One of the things we learned is you need to do a checkup from the neck up. How you spending your money, how you generating money. You need to look at your outflow and your income so that you're spending or circulating less than you're generating. You need to look at the principles of wealth accumulation. And then finally, look at the possibility. One of the things we learned during this pandemic is you need multiple streams of income. If you only had a job and your job is gone, you got a problem. And so multiple streams of income, we hear about it, but now to have this mindset now to say, let me now allocate my time and my resources. Maybe I have a good job, so let me make as much as I can. Let me maybe get more education. When you have a job, the more valuable you are, the more money you make. because they're only going to pay you what you are, the value that you are to your employer. And so if you need to get more education, more skills, whatever you need to do to increase your value to the employer, if you're in the job paradigm, do it. Because that's how you increase your income. If you're in the investment category, then put your money to work for you, let it grow. Don't use it as income, use it as investment. If you're in the business category, look at the multiple streams of income. See, in the job category, there are only so many hours in a day. So you don't have the power to leverage your time. That's the problem with a job. You can't leverage your time. That's why so many of us now are looking at businesses so that we can now say, I can leverage my time. I can create multiple streams of income. So let us sum up today. So what can we do to go forward, to create, to solve the riddle of survival in a way that is meaningful to us? Well, number one, look at our situation. Solving the riddle of survival is about four things. Looking at number one, looking at your situation. Understanding that the riddle of survival must be solved. Number two, assessing your situation where you are right now. We call it the checkup from the neck up. How do you increase your income? How do you be more prudent about your spending? Number three, learn the lessons of the pandemic, the lessons that you've experienced in your life. There are only victories and lessons. And then finally, number four, develop a strategy to solve the riddle of survival. When you develop that strategy, how to put the mix together of the job, the investments, the business, the multiple streams of income. And we call it a strategy because it is at this point, it's a mix of all these things. It's not one or the other. It's a mixture of all these things. And that's why it's so important now that once you make this decision to solve the riddle of survival, to talk to other people who've already done it, to get help, to get insight. Because once you do this, once you solve the riddle of survival and put yourself in a net zero situation where your income, your money working by itself is sufficient to take care of you in the lifestyle that you're accustomed, then finally you're free and you become a master of money. Money is now your servant rather than your master. And it can now help you as a tool, not as a defining tool, but as a functional tool. Help you be what you want to be, do what you want to do, and have whatever you want to have, always knowing that the best is yet to come. So it is. Just take a deep breath for a moment. Those of you who are listening today, thank you so much. I wanted to make sure to get this message to you because this next elevation, these next few months as we close out this year, and it's always important this year, there are only two times, there's now and next. And so what you do over the next 4 months, the last quarter of this year, the last 4 months of this year, not only gives you the opportunity to achieve your goals, but it sets you up for next year. Wherever you end this year is where you begin next year. So it behooves you to take all these lessons and work them so that you can take yourself to the highest level possible. Life is a series of steps. And once you get to the next plateau, you don't go back. You just keep going up. And you keep going up because you keep growing and you keep going. Be sure to go to our website, herbertharris.com. Get a copy of the 12 Universal Laws of Success. And check out our home study course, because in this transition, in this period right now of solving this riddle of survival, the variable, the constant is you. And our home study course is a powerful one. We call it New You for the New Year. What are the things that you must do to transform yourself from where you are to where you want to be? Once again, this is Dr. Herbert Harris. Those on Instagram, those on Facebook, thank you so much for joining us today. Please make comments, share how you're going to use this message, share the message with other people. And whatever you do, like it and take action on it. Always knowing that the best is yet to come.